What's up, guys? It is Captain Erik Tilson, and I am back from Kentucky Lake. We're here in the beautiful Sunshine State. It's like 70 degrees. I'm in a t-shirt, not a pair of bibs, and a jacket, and hot hands, and boots, and wool socks, and everything else that it takes to fish Kentucky Lake the first week of December. We were up there for the Bassmaster. We got water planes flying by. It's a beautiful day. But we were on Kentucky Lake for the Bassmaster Team Championship. The whole trip was full of challenges, but all in all, it was a fun trip because practice went really well. Found several big schools of, I guess for up there, they're big fish. They're like 4 and 5 pound smallmouth, which is a nice fish. But at any rate, I'm gonna go through and show you guys my 3 main baits that I was throwing. The bait that I used to find my fish, and the 2 baits that I used to catch the fish on. So y'all stay tuned. Day 1, let's go. All right, let's talk about baits. It's going to be the 3 baits that I used on Kentucky Lake to locate and catch big smallmouth and some nice largemouth. And that first bait is going to be this dude right here. That is a 3/4 ounce Bakewell custom jig spinnerbait. The arm on it's all bent up. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but the head's chewed up on it. But that spinnerbait right there probably located and caught more fish that helped me kind of be on what I needed to be on through practice. And on day 2, my first cast, my first spot, that spinnerbait yielded a 4 pound largemouth out of a school of smallmouth, really. Fantastic spinnerbait. It's extremely well built. Double silver willow leaves. And of course, it's got the Bakewell custom jigs, flashy tinsel in that skirt. That spinnerbait right there, when I was in an area, I would throw that spinnerbait before I threw anything else. And when I got bit in an area, throwing that spinnerbait, I would slow down and really start to use my live scope to pick apart an area. Now, the main player for me, once I had my areas figured out, was this little guy right here. Wolf packs of smallmouth, individual smallmouth, and definitely those largemouth that were underneath those balls of shad. Could not stand that little guy right here. That is a CPF Lures 3-inch Ned minnow in a color called Ghost Shad. It's these guys right here. Little cool feature about that guy is he glows in the dark, which is pretty cool. But I was throwing this on a small little Megabass Okashira screwhead. Now, it would take a long time to get it down to the bottom on some of those schools of shad where they had the fish chasing them from below. I was throwing at and catching fish, primarily the largemouth, under those balls of shad in 25 and 30 feet of water. It would take a long time to get this guy down there, but once he was down there, the hoverability of this setup was absolutely phenomenal. That little 3-inch minnow on that little mega bass oak shear screwhead was a killer, especially around those highly pressured fish. You know, and I don't think they were seeing something like this very much. I think most guys were throwing a 3-inch swim bait. This setup right here was absolutely killer. This little mega bass oak shear screwhead. It's got a little prop on it that goes in front of the bait. And even at a very slow hover stroll, that little prop right there turns and it gives this thing this little side-to-side shimmy, which was important that week because those cold temperatures knocked a lot of the water temp down. And shad in cold water don't swim quite as aggressively as they do when the water temp is in the 50s and 60s. The water temp before we left, it actually got into the 40s. On day 2, I think I saw it get up to 47 and pretty much stayed around 47 degrees all day. And that super, super subtle presentation with that oak shear screwhead and that little 3-inch CPF lures Ned minnow would get bit when you got in front of them. Now the other guy that I threw a lot, especially at the more aggressive fish that were a little bit shallower, those smallmouth, when they would come up looking for a meal, especially a little bit later in the day and first thing in the morning, was this guy right here. It's just a little jig head that's designed for live scoping fish. And I was putting that CPF Lures 3-inch swim bait. It's a 3.3 is what it is. They call it the Ditto Swimmer. It's on the website. And that blue-red pearl, that guy right there would get bit around those more aggressive fish. This was an absolute killer setup for me. And I got a funny feeling this guy, and probably that 3-inch minnow on that oak shear screwhead, is going to be a killer setup for me on Toho and surrounding lakes around here through this winter. We'll see what happens, but that setup right there might actually wind up being on some of my top bait picks for Toho and the Harris chain and the Winter Haven chain through the months of December. That Bakewell Custom Jigs 3/4 ounce spinnerbait and those guys right there absolutely did the work for me at Kentucky Lake. Didn't have the finish that I wanted to have, but sometimes things happen that are outside of your control. That's all that there is to it. But I would definitely say that if you guys are looking for a spinnerbait, a big spinnerbait, 3/4 ounce spinnerbait, something to throw a little bit deeper, something you can slow roll and keep on the bottom, check those guys out at Bakewell Custom Jigs. The rod that I was throwing the spinnerbait on, the Dobbins Champion Extreme, that's the 744. And I had that paired up with the Lew's BB1 Pro. It's a little bit slower gear ratio. That's that 6.2 to 1, 17-pound Seagar in VizX Fluoro, 6.2 to 1 Lew's BB1 Pro. Absolutely fantastic setup. Love it. The Z-Man Crazy Eyes head with the little 3.3 Ditto Swimmer. Throwing that on the Champion. It's probably my new favorite spinning rod. I recently picked this one up. I've always used shorter spinning rods, but this is that 733 Champion XP from Dobbins. And I've got that on a Revo Rocket. It's 10-pound braid to a 10-pound leader. That's what I've got on both my spinning rods. Fantastic setup. That's that full cork handle. That 733, a little bit longer rod, a little bit stiffer action, really gave me the ability to make a little bit longer casts, especially, you know, running the live scope. I was shooting live scope on Kentucky Lake out to 100 feet. It's easier in that deeper water to see farther out in front of you. When you get on some of these shallow fisheries, like Toho and some of these other lakes that I fish normally, when you start getting out there to 80 and 100 feet and you're sitting in 6-7 feet of water, you know, you really start losing detail out there. But a little bit longer rod, a little bit stiffer action. I was really able to bomb longer casts with that swim bait and get in front of a few more fish. The other setup I was throwing is probably one of my favorites from Dobbins. That's the Sierra Micro Series. That's that 703. You guys have seen this rod in some of my other videos. It's actually still got fish scales on the handle from Kentucky Lake. That's funny. Net rod, Abu. This is an old reel. I think this is a Revo Premier. I've had this reel for a long time. It's been one of the best spinning reels I've ever had. 10-pound braid, 10-pound leader, little Okashira screw head, 3-inch Ned minnow, ghost shad pattern. Absolute killer setup right here for finicky and pressured fish. I don't think they were seeing a setup like this a lot. That's going to be it. I guess we'll see you guys out on Toho. We got Lake Toho fishing reports to do. From what I understand, they've been spraying some of the grass on Toho, so hopefully some good things to come. We'll see what happens. And as always, I'll try to keep you guys updated on Toho. And I hope this video helped you guys out. See you on the next one.